Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram. Let's celebrate 75 years of our country's independence, Azadi. In today's edition of the Unsung Heroes, let us have a glimpse into the lives and contribution of the great men and women who helped us acquire independence. First in our list today is C.F. Andrews, who was born on the 12th of February 1871. The name would indicate Charles Freer Andrews did not belong to India. Yes, he was born in England, in Birmingham. He was a Britisher. However, as he grew up, he was attracted to all those movements which were against the social oppression caused by the colonial rule. He came to Delhi as part of his commissioned work. There, he came in contact with the Indian National Congress and took part in the agitation raised by the cotton workers. Charles Freer Andrews subsequently became a friend of India and became a friend of several of our leaders. He became a close associate of Gopalakrishna Gokhale, and on the request of Gokhale, he went to South Africa to see the plight of Indians there and to work for their upliftment. He was part of the George Smuts discussions, and that is where he also convinced Mahatma Gandhi to leave South Africa and reach India. We could say Gandhi's return to India was because of two great people, one being Gopalakrishna Gokhale and the other Charles Freer Andrews. Later, C.F. Andrews became a very close companion of Rabindranath Tagore and Gandhiji. He took part in several labor movements, thereby rising up to become a labor leader. In 1924, he came to Kerala to participate in the Vaikam Satyagraha. He accompanied Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi to the Round Table Conference, and he also visited the Fiji Islands so that he could work for the upliftment of the Indians there. We have already seen during the colonial rule, people from one part of the colonial empire would be taken as laborers and workers to other parts. So Indians were taken from India to Malaysia, to Fiji Islands, and to so many other places, including Burma or Myanmar. So when they go as laborers, they would not be treated well there. They would be kind of slaves to their British masters and would not be given any kind of independence or even human respect. We saw in South Africa, they were given a kind of second grade citizenship, right? So in Fiji Islands also, Similar was the case, and Andrews went to Fiji Island so that he could consolidate efforts there and work for their upliftment. After 1935, after his involvement in the labor movement and in social reform movements, slowly his mind drifted towards spirituality and he took up religious and spiritual work. Mahatma Gandhi, who was a very close companion, you see on the screen where Gandhi, Tagore, and Andrews sitting and chatting, and Gandhi and Andrews sharing a humorous moment. Gandhi used to call C.F. Andrews by a particular title, C.F. Andrews, right? Charles Freer Andrews. But then, if you only call him by his initials, he becomes CFA. And Gandhi would say, Christ's faithful apostle. Christ's faithful apostle. And that is what CFA stands for. CFA was often called Deenabandhu. Why Deenabandhu? Because he was the relative and the friend of all those people who were oppressed. Deena is someone who has been oppressed, suppressed, and pushed to the corner. And to all those downtrodden people, Charles Freer Andrews was a relative, a bandhu, and that is why he was called Deenabandhu. He made India his own land and breathed his last at Kolkata. Yet another person whom we shall try to remember now is someone who was a native of this land but died a very, very unceremonious death in an alien land. His name is Vasudev Balwant Phadke. Phadke was born on the 4th of November 1845. You can imagine 1845 and thereon the situation in the country. It was the East India Company's rule. He was a Maharashtrian, and right from his young age he was interested in martial arts. He became a student of Krantivir Vastad Salve and learnt several martial art forms from him. In fact, it was in Vastad's school of martial arts that Bal Gangadhar Tilak also took some training. Subsequently, Phadke joined the military offices, not as a soldier, but then he joined the military as a clerical staff. When he was working in the military, it so happened that his mother fell ill and he sought leave for 2 days. That was refused. And that is when his mind, which was already there towards the national movement because of association with Vastad Salve and with Bal Gangadhar Tilak, completely turned towards the country. Meanwhile, he was also motivated by the speeches of Mahadev Ranade. Hearing Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Ranade, Phadke realized the exploitation that was happening. We should remember the East India Company was trying to exploit the resources of India. The company set its quarters here for the sake of trade. But what would they do? They would kind of ship all our resources, bring them back and resell to our own selves. I would just give you one example. There was something called the Indigo riots in Bengal. Those of you who are interested, as we have seen earlier, we may not be able to see all details in these sessions, but then you can always go back and try and seek more information. If you're interested, seek more information about the Indigo Rebellion or the Indigo Riots. To put things in a nutshell, this is what happened. Fields where grains were being grown, pulses were being grown, farming for food. You know what happened? These farmlands or the farmers were instructed not to grow grains or pulses or food material, but they were asked to grow indigo plantation. Indigo is a dye. The indigo plant would give the dye, the blue dye. Why? Because indigo dye was in great demand in Britain. So what they would do is make the farmers grow indigo, collect all that for a very, very small sum, take it there, dye the textile, and then bring it back and sell to us for a very high price. And if you grow indigo on a farmland, gradually the farmland would lose its fertility and will become useless. So this is how the modus operandi was. There were different kinds of economic exploitation. Hearing Ranade and Tilak, Phadke learnt about all this exploitation. In 1875, something happened. The Gaikwad ruler of Baroda was dethroned by the company's forces. It was also the same time that there was a lot of famine in that area and people were starving. Phadke and some of his companions thought, why not steal from the British? Why not rob the British and use that money for the sake of our own people? Today we cannot justify their actions, but then think of what the status was that day and what were people thinking those days. When the Indians were starving, resources were required, money was required, and how to get that money? That money is being stolen from us in a different way and taken to the company. So Phadke and some other youth thought they could kind of rob. That is why we hear of all those train robbery, vehicle robbery, and things like that. Money would be collected from one place. The British officials or the East India Company officials would collect money from the local people, put them all in one box or one container, and carry them from one place to another to be handed over to the higher official. So these people would track the train which was carrying this collection of money, this container, and then rob. So some instances of robbing and then take it for the good of the people, take all that money to help people, or again take that money to consolidate forces against the British. Supposing you want to kind of consolidate a secret army, an army of 20 people, a rebellion, a kind of regiment of 50 people, so that when the company's forces are hitting you, you can hit back or then withstand. So for such purposes that money was required, and there were some instances of such robbery, and Phadke was involved in those instances, and for some time in Maharashtra, Phadke was the kind of a de facto ruler. He had an army of his own, and then he had all the support of the people, the locals and all that. He was almost the de facto ruler for some time. And he used to travel to various places, including the Deccan, different parts of the Deccan, so that he could get more money, more efforts, and more force. But then the Bombay presidency company rule would not tolerate this. So the Bombay governor announced if anyone would catch Fatke and hand over, that anyone would be rewarded very well. You know what Fatke did? Supposing somebody keeps a purse of 10,000 rupees to my head, if I am caught and handed over 10,000 rupees, what would I do? What did Fatke do? That is what is important. Fatke announced, there was a reactionary announcement. There was a kind of a counter announcement. He said, if the Bombay governor demands so much, he wants my head and he has announced a reward of so much for my head. I am now announcing a reward of so much for the head of Bombay governor. See the kind of courage. And he travelled all over Deccan, but then when he was going towards Pandharpur, that land of Lord Vittal, when he was going towards Pandharpur, someone gave the information to the company's forces and Fatke was caught. Vasudev Balwant Fatke was taken to Yemen. Yemen was also part of the colonial area. It was also part of the trade circuit of the East India Company then. So he was taken to Yemen. He tried escaping, but then he was re-caught, re-jailed, re-imprisoned, and objecting to the conditions in the jail where he was treated very badly, he started a hunger fast and died because of fasting. He died on the 17th of February 1883, and that was Vasudev Balwant Fatke. Let's also have a look at some of the other leaders. Friends, as I told you earlier, their lives had been lives of long contribution of gigantic proportions. But in these sessions, we cannot know everything about them or discuss everything about them. Just a glimpse into their lives, just a peek into their windows. And those of us who are interested could get to know more, as their lives would give us more and more of inspiration and motivation. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Azad means freedom, Swatantra. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was born on the 11th of November 1888. His contribution to the national movement and to a wholesome national education is so well appreciated that we celebrate the 11th of November as the National Education Day. He lost his father when he was very young, so grew up with the grandfather, and the grandfather decided to educate the grandson at home itself, in the sense there were teachers who came home schooling. It was a kind of homeschooling for him. And when he was very young, he evinced quite a lot of literary and poetry interest. He took up to journalism, wrote for several magazines. During the partition of Bengal, which was in 1905, his concentration turned completely towards the national movement. He came in contact with people like Aurobindo Ghosh and participated in several revolutionary activities. In 1912, he went into the Al-Hilal movement, which was, of course, banned by the British in 1914. And in 1916, he went into the Al-Falaq and was imprisoned several times for his activities against the British. He was also part of the Khilafat movement and became an ardent Gandhian. He participated in the civil disobedience and the 1942 August Revolution or the Quit India movement. In 1920 itself, he demanded something called the national education. He said education should give us a national perspective and make us strong in our culture. So, along with M.A. Ansari, Hakim Ajmal Khan, and the like minded, including Zakir Hussain, he was responsible for the establishment of the Jamia Millia, which started as the National Muslim University and subsequently became the Jamia Millia. He wanted a coordinated national education, and today, as we see, there are so many Indian institutes of technology across the country, and the University Grants Commission to oversee education in the country. We should remember the IITs and the UGC were established with a considerable contribution from Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Jamnalal Bajaj, who was born on the 4th of December 1884. Let's ask a question. Mahatma Gandhi had 4 sons. Who was considered to be his 5th son? The answer is now easy, isn't it? And it's there writ large. Who else than Jamnalal Bajaj? Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi came back from South Africa, and soon after he established Wardha as his headquarters. It was Jamnalal Bajaj who gave him the land and the place. And he was an honorary magistrate. He was even conferred with the title Rao Bahadur, but then he gave up all that. He didn't want the title. He gave up the post of being an honorary magistrate and got himself involved in the national movement because of Gandhian influence. He was an advocate of children's education, of intercaste marriages, and eradication of untouchability. He opened his own family temple for Dalits to get in and worship. We all know Gandhi was an advocate of the Khadi movement, and it was Jamnalal Bajaj who travelled across the length and breadth of the country to make people aware of the significance of Khadi. These were called the Khadi journeys. And if you take those people, wealthy people, affluent people, or whom we call as, the masters, if you take that list of masters who decided to serve the nation as Mother India's children, the name of Jamnalal Bajaj would be written first. And Gandhi comments, I would remember this prince. He calls Jamnalal Bajaj a prince. He says, I would remember this prince whenever I think of those people who have made their wealth a trust for the common good. We also think today of yet another great soul whose contribution cannot be underestimated. And who is this person? Veer Damodar Savarkar. Veer Damodar Savarkar was born on the 28th of May 1883 in a village near Nasik and grew up to be an extremely intelligent boy. He was one of the 4 children born to Damodar Pant Savarkar and Radhabai. The entire family had a love for learning. When Veer Damodar Savarkar or Vinayak Damodar Savarkar was a small little boy, he used to organize Vanara Sena for the kids like him, and would teach them physical arts, martial arts, and make them strong. In 1899, Vinayak's father died of plague. That was when Vinayak's elder brother had to shoulder the responsibility of running the family. And that was also when Vinayak, because of his patriotic spirit, found an organization called the Mitra Mela. Mitra Mela subsequently became the Abhinav Bharat. And Vinayak, being an intelligent boy, would study well, and the brother thought Vinayak should be sent abroad to study law. We've already seen that by good fortune, Vinayak Savarkar was able to get the Shivaji scholarship on the recommendations of Bal Gangadhar Tilak and on the goodwill of Shyamaji Krishnavarma, and so he sailed to London. When he was in London, he naturally came in contact with the India House, which was the den for all Indians who had gone there. And he came in contact with the Free India Society, which was being formed by several students of India who had gone to study various courses. It was when he was in India House that he came in contact with people like Dr. T.S.S. Rajan, V.V.S. Iyer, Madam Kama, and so on. It was in 1907 that Britain decided to celebrate 50 years of victory over India because of the 1857 War of Indian Independence. We all know the British felt better to call it the Sepoy Mutiny, saying it was an agitation by the Sepoys. But then it was truly a war of Indian independence. So in 1907, at the India House, when Vinayak Savarkar, Madam Kama, Shyamaji, and so many of them were a little pained to see the way Britain was celebrating 50 years of their victory over the Indian forces, they decided to counter by starting a celebration of their own. It was when they also met with Gopalakrishna Gokhale and Romesh Chandra Dutt, and at the instance of Romesh Chandra Dutt, Savarkar decided to write the Indian perspective of the 1857 rebellion. That is when he wrote down in Marathi the history of the first war of Indian independence, and this Marathi version was subsequently translated by Varahaneri Venkatesa Subramanya Iyer or VVS Iyer. We've already seen that as things became very fluctuant at India, as his brother was deported to Andaman, the British police started shadowing Vinayak Savarkar at the India House. So in 1910, he was caught. In fact, he was caught a little earlier. He was caught by the British police and was being transported to India. And as he was being transported, he was taken via the French territory. He tried escaping. It is a tearful story. He was sailing, he was being made to sail. The ship SS Moria was carrying him. And it was not an ordinary voyage. He was a captive. He was chained so that he would not escape. And there were two policemen guarding him all the time. Even to go to the restroom, he had to seek their permission and still would be chained with one policeman sitting outside the restroom. He was all the time seeking for avenues to escape. He knew Madame Kama and VVS were waiting for him in the French soil. So as the ship was nearing Marseille, he decided to escape. And what could he do? He wanted to go to the restroom. As he was let into the restroom with chain being kept outside for a few moments, he decided he would escape through the ventilator which was there, a circular ventilator. Sad that as he tried, he found that he could not get through that narrow vent. So what he did was to remove his attire, make himself almost naked so that he can jump through that. He did jump through that into the waters, sailed fast so that he could get onto the dock. Again, unfortunate that somebody from the ship's deck saw some figure there, one lean figure, almost naked, swimming, and immediately police chased him and they caught him. As he got onto the deck and he was running, on the docks, the police chased him and caught him. Madame Kama and VVS objected, but they could do nothing because there was a kind of a cooperation between the British police and the French police at that point of time. So on the 13th of March 1910, he was caught in the French territory and then handed over to the British police. He was brought to India, hearing, court, and lot of discussions, and then he was deported to Andamans with a charge on his head of 50 years of imprisonment at the cellular jail. 50 years, 50 years. When he reached Andamans, he was just 27 years of age on the 14th of July, 1911. And in the Andaman jail, he was subjected to severe labor. He was made to do all kinds of manual labor. Labor which is generally not given to a political prisoner. That is the difference. A political prisoner will not be given rigorous imprisonment and rigorous labor. Only a criminal would be given with all that. But then, during the British rule, several of our leaders were made to do all kinds of manual labor inside the jails. When he was in the jail, he asked for some library facility. He just wanted to read. He was an ardent reader. He had read so many things and he wanted to read. He wanted some books. Even paper was not allowed. So the poesy in him came out and he wrote an epic by name Kamala on the walls of the jail cell. It was a cellular jail. So the jail cell used to be so small, so narrow, so dark, not at all lit properly. But then he wrote it on the walls. Much later, some other friend of his noticed that it had been written, and because of that effort, it came to be known to the rest of the world. In 1920, Vittalbhai Patel, the brother of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, gave voice, raised a huge voice, a loud voice, demanding the release of Veer Savarkar. Subsequently, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and even Gandhi demanded Savarkar's release. In 1921, Savarkar was brought to the Ratnagiri jail and to Eravada and subsequently released. Later, he got involved in the Hindu Mahasabha, though he himself was not a believer. Veer Savarkar suffered much. Even today, we know he suffered so much that towards the end of his life, he did not do all those revolutionary activities which he wanted to perform when he was young. Veer Savarkar is a great name, and Veer Savarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, will remain a man of inspiration to so many of young Indians. Yet another person whom we shall look at today is Neelakanta Brahmachari. Neelakanta Brahmachari was born on the 4th of December 1889 in a hamlet called Yerukkur, which is near the town of Sirgadi in the state of Tamil Nadu. He was a member of the Abhinava Bharat and was initially a revolutionary. Because of his revolutionary bent of mind and his involvement in the Abhinava Bharat, he came in contact with V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, Vanchinathan, V.V.S. Iyer and Subramanya Bharatiyar. However, as he was trying to publish several pamphlets, booklets, and make people aware of the national movement, because of discussions here, there, and association with Aurobindo Ghosh, there was some kind of a change in his mind. He was drifting from revolutionary activities towards spiritual goals. So slowly he was moving away. In fact, at Pondicherry, it is said that there was a kind of a dispute between Neelakanta Brahmachari and V.V.S. Iyer, and Brahmachari left for the north, maybe for Varanasi. It was at this time that another youth by name Vanchinathan, whose life we shall see a little later, killed Collector Ash at the Maniachi railway station. Collector Ash was primarily responsible for the arrest of V.O. Chidambaram Pillai and Subramanya Siva. charging them with sedition for whatever they spoke amidst laborers, the laborers of the coral mills of Tuticorin. Collector Ash was so much hostile towards them that he charged them with sedition and saw to that they were arrested and given double sentences. This created a lot of uproar and the Tirunelveli uprising. As a result of the Tirunelveli uprising, youth of that area were all against Collector Ash, and Vanchi, one of those who were pained at the way VOC and Subramanya Siva had been treated, decided to kill Ash. So as Ash was traveling with his wife to go to Kodaikanal from Tirunelveli, as the train stopped, halted at Maniyachi for change of engine, Vanchi killed him. And Vanchi also died, shot his own self at the Maniyachi station itself. So what now happened was, the British police started searching for people who were associated with Vanchi and wanted to arrest all of them under this conspiracy plan. And because of certain letters which were found at Vanchi's residence, letters of correspondence between Nilakanta Brahmachari when he was in Pondicherry and Vanchi at Shenkota, they tracked Nilakanta Brahmachari all the way to Varanasi. He was there, poor man. He had left all this and gone there. So at Varanasi, he did not even know. At Varanasi, he was caught. Initially, he was told that he will not be arrested, but then subsequently he was arrested and he was made the prime accused and subsequently the prime convict. So he had to serve a long jail sentence at Madras, Coimbatore, Bellary and Vishakhapatnam. From 1912 to 1919, almost 7 3/4 years, he served a jail sentence. It would have been much longer, but then it was commuted because of his pleasing manners and his good behavior. He came out almost a pauper. He had nothing in hand. No friends, all the friends had left. Nothing at all. And it is said that for few days, as he came out of the jail, he roamed around in the city of then Madras and fortunately was able to find out where Bharatiyar was. It is said that when he met Bharatiyar, he had nothing to eat. He was so poor and so hungry that Bharatiyar sang his very famous lines, Thani oruvanukku unavilayenil jagathinai azhithiduvom. We will destroy this universe if a single man goes hungry. That line is supposed to have been penned seeing Neelakantan's plight. Neelakanta Brahmachari was again arrested in 1922 for participation in communist activities. He was sent to the Myanmar jail and later on released. By then, spirituality had completely taken over him. By 1931, he became a sannyasi, became Swami Omkarananda, and went to the Nandi Hills near Mysuru. He set up his ashram at the Nandi Hills and lived there. Mahatma Gandhi wanted to visit Neelakanta Brahmachari. When he went to the Nandi Hills, he found the ashram was so high up, mountainous terrain, that Gandhi could not climb up, so he requested his assistant to go up and tell Neelakanta Brahmachari. Neelakanta Brahmachari passed away only in 1978, but then his contribution in spreading awareness about the national movement, in consolidating efforts towards the national movement, just cannot be left away. Friends, in the same list, let us also think about Swarna Kumari Devi. Born on the 28th of August 1855, Swarna Kumari Devi was the elder sister of Ravindranath Tagore. She had homeschooling and was married at the age of 13 to Janakinath Goshal. Swarna Kumari, hailing from a family of scholars, was also a poet, a writer, and a novelist. She wrote the first dance drama in Bengali called the Basant Utsav. In 1877, along with her brothers, she started a magazine called Bharati. Bharati meaning Bharat Mata, and penned several articles which motivated people towards the nationalist movement. In 1884, she became a full editor of the magazine. In 1882, she consolidated the efforts of women and started what was called the Women's Theosophical Society. 1886, she formed the Sakhi Samiti, Sakhi, friends, all girl friends. So she made all the women come together. These women were of the upper stratum. So she said, all of you are sitting idle at home, come on, let's all work towards the cause of the nation. And she also conducted what was called the Mahila Silpamela, bringing in all the arts and crafts, culture together. From 1890 onwards, she involved herself deeply in the Indian National Congress, and she believed in Atma Shakti and Swadeshi movements. Alongside Swarna Kumari Devi, we see another lady by name Sarala Devi Chowdharani. Sarala Devi Chowdharani was the daughter of Swarna Kumari. She was given to a lot of social work, but then, along with social work, she was also involved in Swadeshi and revolutionary movements. In 1895, she became the editor of Bharati, which her mother had started. And she thought, Sarala Devi thought, women should get involved in martial arts so that they have self-defense against all the atrocities done by the British officials. Those were days when the British officials would ill-treat women, misbehave with them. So Sarala Devi Chowdharani thought women should be well equipped to have their own protection. She made women and youth take a pledge over the national map, the map of India, and said, let's all pledge towards the goodness of the country, towards the freedom of the country. So she took it upon herself to train men and women, young men and women, youth in all martial art forms. She arranged for several processions protesting against British atrocities, and she also was responsible for what were called the Durga Puja processions. We've seen already the celebrations of several of these festivals were not for the sake of worship alone. Those days, people thought that these were festivals, opportunities for people to join together and consolidate on their efforts towards the national movement. So, Durga Puja processions. Bengal is so famous for Durga Puja, and Sarla Devi Chaudhurani thought Durga Puja processions would be good occasions for all the youth to come together. So, she even advocated certain vratas. She said, Udayaditya Vrata. Vrata would become Bratha in Bengali. Udayaditya Bratha and Veer Ashtami Bratha. Veer Ashtami. Veer Ashtami. Durgashtami. She said, it's a Vrata that we take. It's a vow that we take to work for the country. In 1905, she made Vande Mataram a national call, and she associated Durga worship with Bharat Mata worship. Yet another woman whom we should remember is Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. Born on the 3rd of April 1903, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay is considered to be that grand woman of arts and crafts of India. Kamala Devi was born in Mangaluru as the daughter of collector Anantayya Dareshwar. Belonging to a family of scholars, she learned Sanskrit, dance, and some of the folk dance forms when she was very young. The family was associated with Mahadev Ranade, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and Annie Besant. Since her father, Anantayya, was a collector, he was also famous and he was also given to nationalistic feelings. People like Ranade and Gokhale would visit the family very often, and this girl heard all of them speak, discuss several things with the father, and got attracted towards the national movement. However, due to certain unforeseen circumstances, Kamala Devi had to see poverty at a young age. All their properties were lost. She was married when she was 14 years of age, but then lost her husband when she was 16 years of age. Later, with the responsibility of taking care of her sisters and mother, she moved to Madras or Chennai and started studying at the Queen Mary's College. Remember, Sarojini Naidu and her family members were at Madras then. Sarojini Naidu was a friend of Kamala Devi at Queen Mary's College, and that is when she met Harindranath Chattopadhyay, the brother of Sarojini Naidu, and subsequently, when she was 20 years of age, married Harindranath Chattopadhyay. And that is how Kamala Devi became Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. Later, she went to England for her higher studies, and it was at London that she got completely attracted to the national movement. That is where she met with several Indians who were there and learnt everything about the national movement and got involved. In 1926, in association with Margaret Cousins, she contested to the Madras Presidency legislature from Mangaluru. Though she was not successful that time, she was involved in activities of women development, and she became part of the All India Women's Conference. In 1930, she took part in the civil disobedience movement. She was part of the salt satyagraha at Bombay. She was arrested taken in front of the magistrate. And you know what happened? She started selling salt to the magistrate himself. On the 30th of January 1930, she held the tricolour aloft and took out a procession. During the Second World War, she travelled in several European countries, consolidating efforts for Indian independence. And Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, later on, after independence, patronized arts and crafts from different corners of India. And that is why she came to be called the Empress of Arts and Crafts of India. Friends, so many of them, some of them have contributed lifelong. Some of them had a very brief life but had contributed deep enough. All these people have worked in their own ways towards Indian independence. We enjoy the independence today primarily because of all their efforts. We may not remember several of their names. We may not even be aware of their names. When we celebrate Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and take in the beneficial effects of the nectar of independence, it is our important duty to remember these people, think of them, pray to them, pay our respects, and request that they always motivate and be a support to our dedication to the country. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.